Hey there. So we're back for another episode. Thank you for joining for Get Out There and Get Known. Today, I have a guest that's going to be talking about nonprofit PR, not only just PR for personal brands or for corporations, which obviously we do, but this PR colleague will talk about how she built the brand for Black and Missing Foundation, Inc. And so, anyone who has a nonprofit or an idea of one day of starting a nonprofit or a foundation, this is a good episode for you to listen to because she can give you the steps that she took that garnered her a lot of media attention for her nonprofit. So we'll be back right after this. I'll tell you a little bit more about who Natalie Wilson is and all that kind of good stuff, and we'll just get into this whole episode here. As soon as I find my intro music, right? It's like, okay, here we go. There we go.
Welcome to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast. Join Pam Perry, veteran PR strategist, Emmy award-winning producer and publisher of Speakers Magazine, who will show you how to crack the code in getting out there to get known. Each week, she either interviews her media friends, PR colleagues, or she just goes solo, offering you strategies on publicity, publishing, and platform building. So listen up to hear how to get booked on media places and on superstar stages. Now, here's your host, Pam Perry.
Hey there. So like I told you, my guest is Natalie Wilson. Let me give you a little bit of background of her before I bring her up because I don't want to be embarrassed for reading her bio. She has close to 2 decades of experience in public relations and media relations, obviously press. She has garnered local, national, international media coverage with platforms such as The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, missed that show, The View, Associated Press, CNN, Essence, Fox 5 DC, Huffington Post, NPR, Oxygen, People, Oprah Daily, New York Times, Washington Post, and many, many more. That's what PR people do. She is a Black Girls Rock Community Change Agent awardee, L'Oreal Paris Women of Worth honoree, recipient of the inaugural Crime Con, which is the Crime Fighter of the Year award, as well as we were talking earlier, Ebony 100 and also the Root 100 as well. She's a member of NABJ, National Association Black Journalists. She holds a master's degree in communication from Trinity University and a bachelor's of art from psychology from Howard University. Yes, that HBCU there. And she holds a certificate of strategic perspectives in nonprofit management from Harvard Business School Executive Education. She's the co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation, a nonprofit organization that brings awareness to missing persons of color across the nation. So with that, I bring up Natalie.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good, man. That is so impressive. All the things that you have done in a short amount of time. And it sounds like it's a lot, but let's kind of, you went to Howard, then you got your master's and you've got the education. And then how did it come about of doing the Black and Missing Foundation? And what was the heart of it, I guess you would say, of really taking your PR skills and using it for good?
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about the inspiration behind the Black and Missing Foundation. There was a young lady by the name of Tamika Houston who went missing from my sister-in-law's hometown of Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we read how her family really struggled to get that national media coverage. Weeks later, Lori Hacken disappeared. A year later, Natalie Holloway disappeared. And they dominated the news cycle and received a round-the-clock press. And we all know their names and their stories. And it was so disheartening. And we wanted to know, why aren't we seeing people of color getting that national coverage? Maybe we aren't disappearing at an alarming rate. But what we found was that 30% of all persons missing were of color, primarily Black males. So my sister-in-law and I said, let's do something about it. I'm in PR, media relations. We need that exposure. We need awareness to bring attention to that issue. And she's in law enforcement, helping the families navigate, in working with the police department. And here we are, 15 years later with an organization to help find and bring our missing home. But my PR strategy was very simple. I wanted our missing to be household names too. We know the Natalie Holloway, the Chandra Levy, and the names go on, the Gabby Petito. But when you ask anyone, I'm asking your listeners to name a person of color who has garnered the same level of national news coverage. They can't. And that's what I'm trying to do, to advocate for these families through my media partnerships and relationships so that our missing can be household names too.
I love that. That is what you call using your gift and your talent for good. And it is, it's not easy to start a foundation because you could have did it behind the scenes, but you actually got a foundation up and going, which is not easy to do. And then 15 years ago, social media wasn't as strong as it is now. So you were doing it really from scratch because you're trying to build the audience, without, Facebook and things like that now, but now it's just like, it's social media is everywhere. It's like part of our life ingrained. So when you were doing, is it a 501c3? Is it what type of organization is it?
Yes. So it is a 501c3.
Okay. And so was that the inkling, I guess, once you said, okay, this is really a whole nother thing. Like I've got my PR boutique agency, but then I also have a 501c3. Is that when you decided, says I need to go to Harvard and really like learn this? It's an industry. It's a whole nother industry.
Right. To be honest with you, we were thrown into this arena. So we had to educate ourselves and make sure that we were knowledgeable as we're working with families. Nonprofit isn't what I do, or did initially, but I had to learn pretty quickly. So, getting that Harvard certificate meant a lot. Yes. But what I did lean on were the relationships and partnerships that I have. And sometimes people say, well, how did you take the Black and Missing Foundation from a vision in our living rooms to the view? It wasn't overnight. Right. And what I did was I started locally. I remember the first coverage that we had was the Washington Informer.
Oh, I love them. There are that Denise
Rolark Barnes.
Yes. I love it. And that is the Black community supporting us. Oh, that just warms my heart because that's the whole point of it, right? That's like, they are our friends. They're the person that will tell our stories. Right. And so the Washington Informer, for those of you who don't know, is almost 100 years old. Is it 60 years old?
Yeah.
It's
decades a pillar in the community in DC.
Yes, Black-owned newspaper and family-run still to this day. Yeah.
And when we had our launch, they were the only, media outlet that showed up to cover this story.
I love that. I interviewed her, so just so that people will know that I did interview Denise
really
on the podcast. And it's interesting that she's the publisher now, but her father who started it, she didn't think that she worked there, but she didn't think that she would be working there as an adult, right? It was just like, that's what dad did. But now she's there. And then her son is also there as well, but it's in her blood as part of the patient. So I'll put in the show notes so people can listen to the mission of Why the Black Press. And when Natalie, launches her thing, how it's important to support each other as African Americans, as Blacks. We support each other. The media supports our initiatives, Black and Missing, Black, so it starts there. It starts locally. So go on. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I did. I got so excited when you said they were the only ones that showed up because I know her. She's about it. She's about it.
Yes. And that's fine. And then, honestly, I think just from that coverage, you never know who is watching or reading. So then I think Allison Seymour was on Fox and, reached out. So it started grassroots efforts locally. And then the national platforms were watching. I did send pitches out to national media outlets. And the first person that contacted me was Joe Madison.
Oh my God. He's from Detroit, right? So I love
really? And can I tell you,
Joe
when I got
Madison is like the serious, what do we call him? The bear, the
the
bull,
Black Eagle,
the black eagle. So we, it
yes,
was something begin with a B. Yes, the black
yes,
eagle. Oh my God. I love this. I love this.
yes.
Joe Madison he was in Detroit. He was the president of our local NAACP when he was here.
Oh, okay.
And he had a radio station
Mhm.
that he was a host on, small WXYT, the same station that Rush Limbaugh was on at the time. He
Mm.
was very radical, and just like Rush was radical, he was to the left and to the right.
Mhm.
But yeah, Joe picked up, and he was, yeah, at that point he was probably national because he was doing what, Sirius or WHUR.
It was serious.
It was Sirius.
Yes.
And he just,
And can I tell you, I cried when his producer called because, I kept calling and calling, and I would just burst into tears. And I called my sister-in-law, and she was like, "Okay, are you okay?" And this is huge for us.
yes,
It was
yes.
like, oh my God, it was a breakthrough on the national level,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
just kept pounding the pavement. But I will say, we are considered thought leaders in this industry when it comes to missing people of color
Okay.
because of the Black press.
That's it.
I
That's
was
it.
able to build a relationship with Essence, and Miss DeLuca, Vanessa DeLuca, was the editor at that time.
Mm-hmm,
And just
mm-hmm.
reaching out saying, "Hey, we have this issue. Can you help us bring awareness to it? Can you feature a missing woman on your platform?" And they really embraced us
Oh
with
my
it.
God.
And then the Huffington Post, Black Voices,
Yes.
they heard of us, and it started picking up steam. But we
Mhm.
started off very, very small.
Very local, building up, telling the story. The story was good. You can't always just reach out there immediately to the View, right? Even though, because they're really looking at how you're telling your story, how you're managing the press that you currently get. Joe Madison, Washington Informer, the Fox stations there. I mean, so part of it is, where was your sister-in-law from? What city was she in?
She lived in Spartanburg, but then moved to the DMV area, the
Okay,
DC
so
area.
but the DMV is a large DMA area, so that
Mhm.
kind of helps as well. If you had been like in a smaller city, it may not have picked up as much steam as fast. But
Mhm.
our top 10 markets, Chicago, Detroit, New York, LA, DMV, those are larger markets. But that's where you still treated it like each individual one was important. Each podcast
Absolutely.
that you went on, each weekly newspaper that you want, each blog that
Mhm.
someone, because you knew from PR experience that every media reporter is important.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
like what you just said, you never know who's watching or who's reading, because now we're everywhere. You can
Mhm.
send that link anywhere and put it up in different places. You can put in your email signature. You can just share that story. That's the main thing, that you want to have the story. So now we're working in this. You're doing that grassroots, and then eventually it starts to build steam. And so this is a part of PR that is probably kind of weird for you, because it was weird for me too, where the person who's doing the PR, because you have the skill of like just telling the story, now you become the story. So now you're getting the awards, you're getting the Black Girls Rock, you're getting. So how does that feel when you're getting those kind of things, and it's like, how does this happen? Like, what's going on?
You
Because I'm
know,
sure you weren't pitching yourself.
no, not at all. And actually, I I'm an introvert in an extroverted field, and I love being behind the scenes and
Right.
to be recognized. It's still a little uncomfortable for me, but it's part of the work that we do.
Mhm.
And, it's telling that human interest story,
Yes.
connecting with the audience so that they can tell our story. So I embrace it now, but again, it's very uncomfortable, but very honoring to know that people see the work that we do,
Mhm.
because we work around the clock. This is hard work, and we're meeting families at the most difficult time in their lives. So
Mhm.
to know that, and I feel as though I am the publicist for hundreds of thousands of families
Mhm.
because they're not getting that media coverage or that
Mhm.
exposure. And I want to help them
Mhm.
again
Mhm.
be for their loved one to be that household name so that
Right.
they can be found.
Right. And that's it. That it's so many times when we have something bubble up on our radar, whether, it's like at a certain point in time, it's the buzz going around, it bubbles up on your radar. And that's when one or two things: the person who is abducted the person or the person who is just missing just realizes that there is something going around in the universe that is looking for them, that there's someone that cares, or someone who sees something and then says something. That's
Right.
that's the important part, because if you don't talk about it, then people won't know to really report it. And like you said, your sister-in-law was working with the police, so she knew that internal workings part of that part, and you knew the PR part. So
Right.
working together with the families and that sort of thing is really, really, oh my God, that is so
Right.
good.
And
So
the exposure, the awareness is so important too, because when we first started the organization and we were talking to our community about missing people, they thought sex trafficking was happening abroad in
mhm,
Russia or China or another country. No, it's happening in our backyard. So
mhm,
again, education, awareness, exposure is so vital, but you have to tell it as a story,
yes,
right? So
right.
people can see themselves in it and want to act or bring about change. So it's in PR is having that human interest element
Mhm.
where you want people to, oh, change behavior, or there's a call to action.
That's it. There's a platform, I want to say it's change.org,
Hmm.
that people use now. It probably wasn't around 15 years ago, right? So that was not a thing. It just, everything is changing so new. But I remember having that platform, and someone who wanted to make a change in their community, they started that platform, and they had to get signatures, and people passed it around. And that's kind of like what you're doing, it with the media because of your skill set of doing the media for people. But telling the story is key. Having a story said the right way, presented in the right way, whether it's a press release, a media alert, a fact sheet,
Hmm.
all of those things. And I just really applaud you, because it's a tough time when you're pulling a story out of a family that is distraught, in trauma, right?
Exactly.
It's like, that's like the worst time. I mean, sometimes when I started doing PR, I wanted to only work with authors and speakers, and then it was inspirational authors and speakers. It's like
Hmm.
certain parts of it that I know that I have a capacity for, because I didn't want to do um hard news, or I didn't want to do anything that I felt like I would just be like falling apart and crying, because I'm just such a marshmallow. But for
That's
you
me.
and it's
Yes.
just like, oh my God, but you're using the skills to really help people that
Mhm.
normally wouldn't get the coverage, and
Yes.
getting that coverage. And so I just really like the fact that the Black press would come together and support you. You're part of NABJ.
Mhm.
NABJ, if anyone doesn't know, it's been around probably, what, 50 years or so, maybe longer than that. I don't know, maybe 50 years at least. They've been around, but it's the Black journalists that come together. And so every year they have a conference. Have you ever like given I should say a platform or a panel discussion about what BAMFI is about, or do you plan on it?
Absolutely. Last year, we held a panel discussion
Ah,
about the issue, and Sarah Sidner from CNN was one of the
yes.
panelists, Tammy Fields from Spectrum, and just talking about, the issue and
Mm,
why there is a disparity in media coverage. And what we found is that most media outlets, news outlets, do not have a policy in place as to how they cover missing people. So a family calls the news station. Who decides who's going to get coverage? No one could answer that question because many news outlets don't have a policy in place at all.
oh
So
my God.
that was disheartening. And now that we have that information, we are trying to partner with news outlets, and we're also keeping that issue in the forefront so that the decision makers, the gatekeepers, the editors can put a policy in place so there can be fair and equitable coverage for everyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's one of the things too of making sure that um, there's disparity in all types of things, disparity
Mhm.
with the wealth and with our health, media coverage, all of that. But with us being in the field, we know that we could do a little bit more control with that, partnering with NABJ and all the different other partners that you have to bring that together. So when someone, and you probably do a little bit of research with the foundation. So when someone does end up missing,
Mhm.
what are you talked about sex trafficking, human trafficking. What are some of the main, I guess you say, threads or the themes that you see, and then the age of it, male or female? What tends to be the top three of why a person, black person, goes missing? What is it? Is it, some people say, well, they're probably in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they were on drugs. I mean, what are the misnomers that people think, and then maybe what your research has shown?
Well, it's exactly what you just said. There's a stereotype that when our children are reported missing, they're also often classified as a
As a runaway. Oh, Natalie, you there? She froze a little bit, but she was saying that initially, hopefully you come back, Natalie. She was saying that when people are reported missing, that the initial thing that people assume is that they are runaway. And Natalie, you're froze, so hopefully I can hear you. And then I want to hear what the other ones were as well. You're frozen. My ticker is running across the bottom, but you're frozen. I can't hear you. Maybe you could come back and come back in. Can you hear me? Uh, that's the thing. So this is the thing about live TV, right? So live that. So I'm gonna. There she is. She's gonna go out and come back in. So one of the things too, when you have a gift, and her gift is media relations, and she has these relationships, you got to realize, what is the purpose of that? Why did God give you the gift of storytelling? Why did God give you the ability to have the relationships with the people that you have? Why did God give you the burden to have it on your heart to even want to care? Right? Why did He even give Natalie Wilson the burden to want to care? And so really it's for her to do the work that she is doing right now. There you are. There you
Yeah.
are. Okay.
Sorry, technology.
I know, but you were saying the first one is that we assume that people think that, oh, runaway kid.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the perception is that the child left home voluntarily. So who cares, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
Amber Alert, there is no media coverage at all. But what we do know is that a child being on the street for 24 to 48 hours, they're propositioned for sex. So now we have another issue that we're dealing with. And we need to figure out, why did they leave home voluntarily? Like, what are they running away from? And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, what are they running into? We're also finding that many times our missing are stereotyped as being promiscuous, being involved in some type of criminal activity. And what we're trying to do is to change the narrative that
Mm-hmm.
these are valuable members of our community that are missing: mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, people that look like me and my
Mm-hmm.
family members.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we just have to continue to pound the pavement to show that we matter, our missing matter, and we
Mm-hmm.
have to bring them home. And I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question? I
The
wanted
first
to.
part was like, what are the main statistics, men, women, age wise, in terms of what your research has shown? Has it been like mostly, what, 60% women, 40% men?
Mhm. Well, I will say that the FBI stats show that 40% of all persons missing are of color. We
Mm.
believe that number is much higher because typically they classify Hispanics as being white. And we do know that research shows that 24% of Hispanics classify as African American or Afro Latina. So the numbers are much higher. And we have a population that's really afraid to interact with law enforcement, so they're not reporting their loved ones missing. Since
Mhm.
the pandemic, our caseload has increased tremendously because people are going missing because of mental health challenges.
Mm-hmm. Right.
domestic violence, sex trafficking. We have parents that are aging and, they have dementia,
Oh, right.
Alzheimer's. So it runs a
Yes.
gamut of reasons why, people are disappearing at an alarming rate. But we do know that many times race is a barrier to media coverage and law
Mm-hmm.
enforcement resources. Your zip code can be a barrier.
Mm.
And we want to remove those barriers because this is a life or death matter and our missing matter too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is really, it reminds me of a story that I'm in Michigan. So it was, when you said about mental illness, it was a woman who, it's winter here, it's cold, and she went
Mm,
and she just felt like people were coming after her, that someone was trying to kill her. And so she
mhm,
went into the woods, winter, and took her children, and
mm,
she died. And the children, I think they basically had hypothermia and all of that kind of thing, but basically it was mental illness.
mhm.
And part of it was that, the family was trying to say that she's missing, something's wrong, something's going on, but they found her too late. And like you said, having protocols in place are really, really important. There is a communications director that I know that's in Pontiac. She just got there probably within the month or so, and I'm thinking like she's probably putting those protocols. When do you send out an Amber Alert? When do you really make a press conference about it with the city, and those kind of things? I mean, there's a lot of things to look at, but the main thing is that no one should die because no one's not looking for them, right? That's like
Exactly.
the whole point. And then the whole trafficking thing, that's a whole another area that people, have a people don't understand about it, that they think it only happens overseas, but it does happen here. So the awareness that you're bringing about it is really important. Using your PR skills, telling the stories, really making sure that policies are in place, partnering with people, and basically, when you do have a good story as well, that you're
Mhm.
sharing that as well. So that
Absolutely.
people will say, okay, well, look what happens when we do come together as a community and look for someone, and you find the good story of someone reunited.
Right.
That's like the main thing. That's the main thing. So what is next for Miss Natalie? What is on the agenda for the rest of the year? Anything? Are you doing fundraising? Because we want to support the work that you're doing. Is there a foundation? Um, how do we say it? Event? I know those take a lot of energy, but what's next?
Wow. Well, coming off the heels of the HBO docuseries Black and Missing, I mean, there's a need for the work that we do, and we have a major announcement to make on Friday. So
Okay.
here,
All right. All
I'll
right.
share the press release with you.
Okay, and we'll put it in the show notes and the details for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We're making a major announcement again to continue to keep this issue in the forefront and to bring exposure and awareness not only to the work that we do, but for the families that we serve. One
Mhm.
of the biggest concerns that we hear from families is that they want their loved ones to have a voice.
Yeah.
And, we have to have the platforms to do so. So that's what we're working to create
Oh,
our own platform to give these families the voice that they deserve.
mhm.
We have our 5K that's coming up June the 3rd at the National Harbor.
Okay.
And it's
All
the
right.
hwb5k.org. And if the community can come out and join, rally around these families that are searching for their missing loved ones, we would love it.
Oh, that
But
is
can
good.
I just add one more thing?
Yes, yes.
We know that everyone is not going to get that media coverage, right? And we're not naive in believing so, but we do utilize social media to help us find
Mhm.
our missing. And we're asking the community to be our digital milk carton. I remember
Mhm.
growing up, there were missing persons
Always on the
profiles
milk
on the
right.
milk. So now it's social media.
That's
We
true.
don't have to wait for the normal news cycle. We don't have to reach out to an assignment editor. We can do it ourselves. And that's what we have been doing. So if, your listeners, your viewers can follow us on bamfi.org. Let's start with who's missing from your community and share that information within your network, because it takes one person to come forward that can bring someone home.
That is so good. Thank you so much. That is so true. And I know of a PR colleague who regularly shares information, Pam Purifoy. And she's that type of person too. She shares as well. And maybe she heard you at NABJ one time or something, but it was like just recently she started sharing. I was like, oh, okay, that's really good, because we share all sorts of jokes and whatever, but share something for good. So thank you for making that point. BAMF.
BAMFI.org.
Yes, stands for Black and Missing Foundation Inc.org. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. It has been a joy. Your friend Joy was actually on the podcast as well. So I'll put the show notes on there as well, because Joy was on the podcast as well, Joy Sutton. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really, really good and enlightening. And for any nonprofit that has a foundation, know that they can take the same type of skills and promotion, telling a story to the media to get their cause the attention that it needs, the shine that it needs. And that's how they get out there and get known. So don't be afraid to tell the story. But I will say, if you are African-American, please start with your local Black press, whether it's the radio, like the Joe Madison, or something, a Black talk show host in your area, or one of the newspapers. That is so key. That is so key. And obviously podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts. So you want to make sure that you're doing that as well. All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All righty. I'm Pam Perry, and I'm out.
You've been listening to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast, brought to you by PamPerryPR.com, where you'll get insider tips on how to build your platform, pitch the media, and promote yourself with confidence. Head over to PamPerryPR.com and get the exclusive video training on the 7 must-have marketing materials you need before you pitch, in order to be considered in media places or superstar stages. PamPerryPR.com, where we help you shine like a superstar.